To summarize on this one, the Revolutionary period brought the first widespread questioning of slavery, right? We didn't have it until then. People had, believe it or not, which is hard for modern people to believe, they had not questioned slavery in its existence. In the states north of Maryland, where slaves were few, the institution was ended, usually gradually, over 2 decades after the victory at Yorktown. So it's going to take a long time before it's removed. From Maryland south, slavery persisted. Its ending was blocked by an unwillingness to make an economic sacrifice. Remember, this would have been an enormous capital loss for the owners of slaves, and there were many of them in places like Maryland and Virginia and South Carolina. So they were unwilling to sacrifice that. And as much or more by the inability to envision a biracial republic. What would you do when you had freed 40% of these people, or in the case of South Carolina, 60%, a majority of these people? How would they fit into a society in which for a century to be black was to be a slave and to be white was to be free? So this was something that the founders and the leaders in those states couldn't get around. That was they couldn't get over those two hurdles. And so what we see is this struggle during the Revolution of a sentiment against slavery, and it has a number of different sources, but it's not as strong, it's not as intense as it will be later, and it runs up against a very stubborn economic interest, and an economic interest that's backed by a racial concern. And so slavery begins to be very difficult to get rid of. And what you see because of this pattern that we have described here is the beginning of the split between the North and the South after 1800, where you have an area of the country that has freed slaves, that's committed to freeing slaves, and an area of the country, the 5 southern states, that are committed to holding slaves. So I think that will be all. Thank you very much.